I thought I would make a quick video to show you guys how to factor by grouping. We'll look at the following two examples. Alright, so remember, when you're factor by grouping, you need to have 4 terms. Well, today's lesson doesn't have 4 terms, there's only 3, so we have to do a little bit of work to get this to have 4 terms. Alright, so if you look at the notes from today, it says that you're going to have to take A times C off to the side. Okay, so let me write out first example again. Okay, so I'm going to take A times C, and that gives me 80. Alright, now I'm going to write down all of the factors of 80 until I find one that can give me a 42. So for example, 1 and 80 can't add or subtract to give me 42. However, a 2 and a 40 could. Alright, so how could a 2 and a 40 give me a negative 42? Well, if they were both negatives. And then I need to make sure that a negative times a negative would still be a positive. So, since this works, I don't need to keep writing out all the factors. Alright, so now my next step is that I'm going to replace the negative 42a with my 2 factors. So I'm going to rewrite it and say negative 5a squared. Instead of saying negative 42a, I'm going to put these first, and I don't care which one of those you write first. I'm just going to choose to put the 40 first. Okay, so now I've split up 42 as a negative 40 and a negative 2. Alright, and now I have my 4 terms. And now this goes back to yesterday's lesson where now I can group them. Okay, so I'm going to group the first 2 terms. I'm going to group the last 2 terms. And this step 3 right here, this is where some of you are struggling with. I'm figuring out the greatest common factor. And what that means is what's the largest number that both terms have in common. So if we look at negative 5 and negative 40, the largest number that they are both divisible by is a negative 5. So I'm going to bring out a negative 5. Okay. Now I need to look at a and a squared. So a squared is really a times a. There's an a. What do they both have in common? They both have an a. So I'm going to factor out an a as well. Right? When you factor something out, that means you're dividing it out. So negative 5a squared, we divide out a negative 5 and an a. That's going to leave us with an a. Negative 40 divided by negative 5 is positive 8. And I took out the a. Alright, so now I'm going to move on to my second group. Okay. What's the greatest common factor of negative 2a and negative 16? Well, the largest number that they're both divisible by is a negative 2. Okay. What do I have left? Okay, so negative 2a, divide out the negative 2, I'm left with an a. Negative 16 divided by negative 2 is a positive 8. You want these to match up. If they don't match up, maybe you didn't take out the correct greatest common factor, or if these don't match up, the problem could be not factorable. But since these match up, that's my like term, that's one of our answers. Now the other answer is the greatest common factors. Okay. Now, factoring is just kind of the reverse process of distributing. So if I wanted to make sure that I was correct, I could do the FOIL method, or distributing, and take negative 5a times a. That gives me negative 5a squared. Negative 5a times 8 gives me the negative 40a. Negative 2 times a gives me the negative 2a. Negative 2 times 8 gives me negative 16. And those two like terms would simplify to what the original problem had. Now let's take a look at the second example. I could just dive right in and do a times c again, but that's going to give me a larger number. Hopefully you realize that all of these numbers are divisible by a negative 4. Okay, so if we can shrink our numbers down, you want to do that. Alright, so that would give me a squared plus 8a plus 15. Okay, I'm going to remember this -4 for my answer later. Okay, this is still not 4 terms, so I need to do A times C. So A times C is 15. And I'm going to write out the factors of 15 and see which one can give me an 8. Well, 3 and 5 can if they're both positive. Okay, so now I'm going to replace the 8a with a 3a and a 5a. So I'm going to say a squared plus 3a plus 5a, that's still 8a. I've just broken it into 2 pieces. So that way I now have 4 terms. Again, you could have put 5a first and then the 3a, it would still work out. So now we're going to group. Okay, so I'm going to group the first 2 terms, and I'm going to group the last 2 terms. A squared and a, again, they both have an a, so that's their greatest common factor. A squared divided out an a is a. 3a divided out of a is 3. Looking at my second group, 5a and 15, both are divisible by a 5. So 5a divided out of 5 leaves me with a. 15 divided out of 5 leaves me with 3. Again, these match up. So that's my like term. My other answer is the a plus 5. And don't forget about the -4 that we factored out from the beginning. That's still part of the final answer. If you forget it, you're going to get that taken off. There's my simplified answer, and it's completely factored. And I hope this helped. If not, email me some questions.